Live from the basement of the YouTube headquarters, it's the Stacking Benjamin Show. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug, in retirement. It can be a time of unicorns and rainbows or dark days and stormy nights. Which will yours be? Like the top meteorologists at your favorite TV station, we'll swoop in today and help you avoid retirement disasters. What are they? How should you prepare? We'll be your guides. But that's not all, because halfway through this discussion, I'm going to guide you all toward our year-long trivia competition. Can Paula Pant win 2 in a row? I mean, 2 in a row. I mean, it could happen, I suppose. We'll find out. And now, a guy who just found out he's saving a lot of money on his car insurance, it's Joe Saul-Sehy.
Thanks, Doug. Hey, happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to the first episode in July. I am Joe Saul-Sehy, and man, the controls elude us today here in headquarters. If you're hanging out with us live on YouTube, we're just having some fun. But we're going to have some fun today because this episode is an emergency broadcast in the Department of Bad Retirement Decisions. If you claimed Social Security because your brother-in-law said, hey, you got to grab it before the government runs out, please remain calm. Your retirement plan is I'm going to work till I die. Well, stop operating heavy machinery. And if your entire portfolio is in your old employer stock because, quote, it's been good to us, congratulations, you might be nominated into the wall of shame, which is what we're going to do today. We're going to create the retirement wall of shame. And of course, the guy who helped me kick off this show is a guy who's not ashamed of anything that happens at his house. Mr. Neighbor Doug is here.
Are you kidding me?
No shame ever. How are you, man?
Oh, we're proud of our debauchery here in this house.
Absolutely.
Great, Joseph. How
you
are
ready
you?
You ready to meet the team, Doug?
I'm ready to meet the team. We have a new team member today that I am irrationally excited about having here. We need to spice things up a little bit in the basement, and this new roundtable member is going to do it.
I'm super excited that they are with us today. But first up is the host of the show that reminds us that we can afford anything, but not everything, which is also what Mom says when I try to order both mozzarella sticks and refinance my mortgage. Paula Pant is here. Inflation's hitting. Paula, how are you?
I bet you could refi your mortgage and order mozzarella sticks with the money that you save by virtue of doing that refi, right?
The order matters. The order matters. It's like sequence of return, sequence of expenses.
Sequence of mozzarella sticks.
Sequence of mozzarella sticks, right. Paula, you want to find out who's on the panel with you today?
Yeah, I'd love to know.
Next up, he's the host of Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors, which means he's the person at the table who will say, actually, let's model that. And somehow he makes it fun. Mr. Jesse Cramer's here.
What's not fun about a spreadsheet, Joe? Spreadsheets are, if you don't find a spreadsheet fun, I mean, it says a lot about you. It also says...
We could have just said, Jesse Cramer freaking the sheets, the spreadsheets.
That's correct.
Yes?
I V-looked up from my microphone, and I don't know how to finish that joke because I don't have a sense of humor. I'm a spreadsheet guy.
That's right. Well, I don't know, man. I would say that you're one of those freaks of nature that can do both. I don't know. Don't know how you do it, man, but you find a way.
Speaking of freaks, though.
Speaking of freaks, would you like to meet our special guest, Jesse?
I would love to.
Our special guest is the co-host of the How to Money podcast, a show about practical money, regular people, and occasionally, Jesse, beer. How about that? Which means this man's uniquely qualified to answer the question, is this retirement plan frugal, or are we just eating cat food with confidence? That's right. He's back. Mr. Joel Larsgaard joins us. How are you, man?
Good, man. If there's not enough money for craft beer, you're doing retirement wrong. That's for sure.
That's right. I thought you were going to say the deluxe cat food. Then you're doing retirement wrong.
If you have to resort to cat food, but it allows you to drink the best beer on earth, that's fine. Like, that's a worthy trade-off.
I'm super happy you're back with us on a Friday. What's been going on at How to Money, man?
Man, you know, the norms, there's nothing to talk about in terms of money, right? Like, everything is staying stagnant. Like, just really nothing interesting to discuss. So we're pretty bored over there. I'll tell you that.
Well, we've got a super fun show today, and I'm super glad that you could join us because today we are going to be chatting about retirement. And so many people make retirement mistakes. And the ones that we're not going to talk about today are the cute ones, like forgetting your 401k password, right? That's a neat one. But the monster ones, the ones where you find people Googling, how do I do a reverse mortgage at like 3 a.m., which is, by the way, something you usually don't want to do. We're going to address mistakes like that. So we've got Joel here. We got Jesse here. We got Paula here. Doug's here. We are going to take one quick break. We only have 2 advertiser spots during the show. We're going to have one now, and we're going to have one in the middle of our trivia competition. Can Paula Pant win 2 weeks in a row? We're going to find out. But first, we're going to hear from our sponsors, and then Joel, Jesse, Paula, Doug, and I, we're going to build this retirement wall of shame. Okay, team, here's how this works. We have a board full of retirement disasters, right? Imagine you've got this huge board of retirement disasters. What's going to happen is each member of our panel is going to nominate the mistake they think deserves a spot on the Retirement Disaster Hall of Shame. You're going to have to defend your nomination, and everybody can agree, they can object, you can heckle politely, or you can ask, is that really worse than buying a timeshare? Like, which one is it going to be? So for every disaster, we're going to give you an emergency kit, what to do next, and what to check next, when to call a professional. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to start with pre-retirement mistakes. And then after the break, after the trivia contest, we're going to do post-retirement. So let's lay out the scenario. This is the biggest problem for people in pre-retirement widely, retiring without a spending plan, right? We have no spending plan at all. And I think all of these things go to that point of not having a spending plan. We don't have plans in all these different places. So Paula Pant, we'll start with you. What are you going to nominate for the pre-retirement wall of shame?
With regard to not having a spending plan, I don't think I understand the rules of this game. So like wall of shame about not having a pre-retirement spending plan?
Margin call.
No,
Margin call.
I think everything, I guess the reason I brought up the spending plan is just because I feel like all these are going to wind up with being a part of, I don't know what retirement looks like. I don't have any idea what retirement's going to be like. So I have this mistake.
Okay. All right. So mistakes that people make because they don't know how to plan for retirement.
Exactly. Thank you. Paula Pant, new co-host of this show.
All right. I would say inadequately guarding against like gray swan or black swan events because they, again, don't know how to adequately plan for it. And because there's so many variables and so much that's unknown with regard to your health, with regard to your family's health, etc.
So not guarding against black swan events. So wait a minute. So you're talking about both in the economy and the world, like 2008?
I was thinking more in terms of personal life, right?
Yeah, like all of a sudden disaster hits.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't have adequate levels of protection for any kind of personal disasters.
Oh, I gotcha. So everything's going to go perfect syndrome.
Exactly.
Yes. Joel, you like that one for the wall of shame or not?
I do. Can I piggyback on that just a touch? I just want to say, like, that was my first thing was going to go to was just assuming that you're going to be employed where you're working until you want to retire, right? And that's the kind of like black swan event maybe you're referring to, Paula, is just, yeah, I'm going to work until I'm 70 and then I'll ride off into the sunset. But if for some reason your health fails you or your employer says, actually not so fast, we're going to, cut bait at 64, then you've got a lot to figure out. And so just assuming that you're going to work as long as you want to is kind of one of those potential black swan events that can befall. So I'm going to say, yeah, that goes on the board.
I'm glad you brought that up, Joel, because there was a study that we covered recently on the show, and you guys, I'm sure you saw this come across your desk as well, which is I think the average person retires about 2.5 years before they expected, like just for one reason or another, either something in their life or the boss decides to let them go, age discrimination, all the above, pick a thing. People don't go when they think they're going to go.
It's not usually because they won the lottery and they're like, all right, I guess I'm getting out early. It's usually because they're out for some other reason, unexpected reason. And those extra couple of years, right? That means potential lost investment returns if you have to start tapping things early. It means lost income that could have gone towards, padding your investments. There's just a whole bunch to figure out. And oftentimes for a lot of those people, those are peak earning years, right? It's not some of those like early 20s earning years that are a little bit lower. So that can really complicate things for a lot of people.
Well, and in the early 20s when it's easier to change jobs, frankly.
Right. Yeah, you can pivot a lot more easily.
And Doug, thinking about this, I think, because this was on a Monday show, I believe, the average person said they want to retire at 65 and they retired at 62 and some change.
Right.
Yeah, I think that was the number.
We did
Jesse,
talk about that.
Jesse, you think this goes on the wall?
I do. And I do. And I had a question for Paula. I don't know the answer to this one. Did you say gray swan?
Gray
well?
swan, yeah.
So what is a gray swan?
Okay, so a gray swan would be something like a divorce, which is like statistically probable. You can't really call it a black swan because it's common enough that you could reasonably expect it. And yet no one expects that it will actually happen to them. So if it does happen to you, you're shocked.
I bet it gets more statistically probable the closer it gets.
I mean, it depends on the relationship. Some people are really caught off guard. If there's a cheating spouse, like they discover an affair, some people are really, it comes as a big surprise.
Yeah.
Or like, hey, we've been together 30 years.
Yeah.
And I didn't expect that this was going to unravel, but the kids move out of the house and it's like, what do we talk to each other about? Because we haven't been working on a relationship for the last couple decades.
Have you seen, Joel, speaking of statistics, every time Joel says something, I go, have you seen the statistics on that? But seriously, kids move out of the house, Joel. That's a work on my marriage time because this is when divorce hits for a lot of people with kids.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it goes to the point that like for a lot of people, we're so focused on building money to be able to retire. We're so focused on a lot of that involves work and trading off time for money in order to get there. And we're less focused, especially for those decades in your 40s and 50s so often, on building the relationships that matter, that are going to ultimately be where you find a lot of joy and meaning in retirement. And so if you like let those fall by the wayside, your retirement could be like far less enjoyable than you assumed it was going to be.
Yeah, it was definitely the hardest time in Cheryl and my relationship because you go from spending a lot of your time parenting to just being the two of you, and ended up, more solid than ever before. But man, we had to really get through a lot of stuff when it was then just the two of us. So Jesse, you were saying it goes on the wall of shame.
Yeah,
even with the gray swans and the 100%. Blue swans and the yellow swans and the.
I'm even more convinced by the gray swans, I think, than the black ones, only because, part of the whole black swan definition is that it's risks that are so out there that maybe you couldn't even be expected to think of them or prepare for them in the first place. Whereas the gray swan events, especially now that I understand them better what they are, I mean, some of those are the events. I think another one could be just like health concerns. Like when you're healthy, all you ever really think about is like, man, I'm so healthy. And then I could see when you're approaching retirement and at those ages, there are a lot of sneaky health concerns that can come up and really derail your retirement plan in some way. So not considering those gray swans, I think could definitely be a reason to be up on the wall of shame. So I like it.
All right, Paula. So now it's time for our fix. It's up on the wall of shame. Congratulations. You made it through the nomination process.
Woohoo!
What's our first step to fix this?
I would sit down and if you have a partner, maybe this is like a couples exercise, or if you're single, do it by yourself or do it with a financial advisor. But like sit down and brainstorm a list, or I guess you could do this with AI too. Brainstorm a list of like what the gray swans are and what the black swans are. And once you've brainstormed that list, then kind of write out, all right, if this, then that. Like if this were to happen, what would I do next? How, actually write it out, because that'll give you an idea of how prepared you are.
Paula's got it, I think, on a strategic level, Joel, but let's do some tactical things like the moves I can make that will reduce my chances of having a problem. What's one move I maybe can make that can help me get through black swan and gray swan events?
Yeah, I mean, I think one is like flexibility, right? And for a lot of people, they're like moving in a certain direction, and the idea of pivoting, the older we get, the harder that becomes, like to kind of shake things up or make a change. And if you're only focused on like this one way of moving forward, and you don't have enough flexibility to your financial plan and to your life plans, the ability talk with your spouse if you have one, or just say, hey, listen, I'm going back to the drawing board on what I actually want out of life, or what a great retirement actually looks like for me. You have to be willing, I think, to make a shift, to make a change if things don't go according to plan. Because there's always going to be a wrench in your plan, right? It's that Mike Tyson phrase about everyone's got to plan until they get punched in the face.
Punch in the face, right?
Yeah, and I think the gray swan is like a punch in the face, and you can just like sit there and take more punches, or you can like reassess your game plan, and that's going to be part, I think, of what it looks like to move forward and make changes and still be able to retire well.
It sounds like, though, if you're talking about that, like I'm thinking really tactically, you're saying emergency fund. I mean, interpreting what you're saying emergency fund because that gives you the ability to pivot. You're saying stop over optimizing money into retirement accounts, maybe keep some money in a flexible place.
Yeah, I think some of that, but then I think it's also just truly like, well, I mean, do I really feel like I have to retire at 66? Or do we both need to retire at the same time? Do our travel plans for those first couple of years have to look as ostentatious as maybe we were planning or hoping? Or like, can we pivot and do something? Can we take the truck around the country, like, and hit some campsites? Like, can you make other changes, I guess? If something happens, that doesn't mean, having a beefed up emergency fund is great, and just having more financial flexibility. But then I think also having more flexibility when it comes to your plans and what will make you happy, what you're going to be okay with in terms of lifestyle.
Gotcha. It reminds me of, I heard a comedian talking recently about his structure, and he's got like a series of jokes, but he also has an off ramp if that series isn't going well. Like having your own, if things aren't going well toward retirement, knowing what your off ramps are. Similar thing, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, as a comedian, like, you have to have that on stage, right? Because if you're bombing, you got to make a pivot, and you got to like please the audience in another way. And I think you got to figure out the same thing. Like, life lets us down all the time. Like, it's not, I love being a dad. Like, we just, Father's Day was just a minute ago, but like, man, being a dad has its like share of aches and pains at the same time. And it's not always the way I envisioned it. It's not always like a Hallmark greeting card. So what does it look like to engage with my kids and to have a lovely time, even if it's like different than how I envisioned it?
It's not a unicorn or rainbow to be Joel Larsgaard every day.
That's right. It's harder than you think, guys.
Wow. Jesse Cramer, your time to nominate somebody for the Wall of Shame, or a something for the Wall of Shame. Pre-retirement, what are you thinking?
So for pre-retirement, I think that the assumption that your pre-tax wealth will resemble or even be identical to your post-tax wealth is a very common mistake that pre-retirees make. Especially because a lot of people, their easiest avenue to saving for retirement is through a pre-tax account. There's probably an employer match there. People often end up with the majority of their assets in a pre-tax account, and they never actually think to themselves, wait a second, I'm going to have to pay some taxes on a lot of this money. And so they do all their retirement calculations just looking at the pre-tax number. They don't actually take taxes into account, and they end up making a pretty big retirement mistake.
It's like our friend Ed Slott says, you're still sharing it with the government, Jesse.
That's correct. And Ed is right. And of course, there are things you can do to try to minimize that impact and plan around it. That's what good planning does. But it's very hard to avoid altogether.
Actually, now that I think about it, Ed doesn't even say, with 4th of July coming up, this is an apropos quote. He doesn't say the government. He says, you got to share it with Uncle Sam. And you know what, Joel? He's not even your real uncle. Not even your real uncle.
I know. We're not even related, man. That makes it even harder to stomach.
You're sharing your 401k with that guy?
That's right.
Do you think this belongs on the Wall of Shame?
For sure. I mean, I think when you're looking at, there's a huge difference between having $1 million in a traditional IRA versus a Roth IRA. And there are understandable reasons why people would make different choices, I think, on the contribution side of things. But then when it comes to planning how you're going to be able to spend that money, you got to factor in, well, what is my tax burden going to look like in retirement? And so if you are maybe thinking more along the lines of, well, yeah, I got all this money and I'm just start planning out my spending, and you're not thinking about where the tax man's going to come in and enter the situation, then it's just poor planning on your part. And yeah, that'd be a big time retirement fail.
Paula, we need a dissenting opinion here. Come on. Tell me Jesse's isn't going right up on the wall.
No, I place it on the wall.
How do we fix it, Jesse Cramer?
Yeah, I think there's no substitute for good planning. And I guess it just starts with maybe some education of just, we want to make sure that the average pre-retiree investor, stacker, anyone listening right now is simply aware of how their various accounts could get taxed, kind of how those accounts and withdrawals from those accounts could kind of play in concert with one another. And simply, you can even go online and use some free tools that are fairly rudimentary, some paid tools, which are much more intricate. You can work with a planner, which is obviously something you would pay for, but there are a lot of avenues that you can use to try to figure out, okay, how much in tax would you owe on average in any given year during your retirement, how it changes throughout retirement, before you claim Social Security and after, maybe before the first spouse retires or after both spouses retire, before and after RMDs start, all those kind of things. The goal being, of course, to, minimize your lifetime tax bill in a way, or maybe the other way of thinking about it is maximizing your lifetime after-tax wealth. There are a lot of avenues that you can use to figure that out. It starts with education, and then probably the next step is a good calculator or person to help you do the calculations.
Joel, do you have a calculator that you prefer for this kind of thing?
No, I like to use my brain, Joe. I just like to go solo on this one,
I'm a ninja.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I want to say, I think this is especially why when I'm talking about Roth IRAs in particular, this is something that we're like young people in their 20s and 30s. Like, let's say maybe they've got a lot of room left to run when it comes to earnings. And when you have the availability of a Roth IRA before, let's say, maybe you make too much money and you can't put money in a Roth IRA, it's a great problem to have, but it's still a sort of problem. I'm so glad when I was in those young years and I couldn't even max it out, but I was sticking money in the Roth IRA and I was just trusting that it was going to save me money on future taxes. And then to see that thing grow and then to be like, that's tax-free money at some point.
Yeah.
And then having that balance as well. Like some people maybe they just talk smack about the traditional and they're like, you should put everything in Roth. But really, I think what Jesse's alluding to here is that it's a difficult conundrum because you're talking about trying to save as much tax as you can across the whole span of your life. And it's really hard to predict all that stuff out. So you're doing your best. But I think one of the best things you can do, especially for younger stackers, is to prioritize the Roth IRA in those early years. And then you can make changes as you move on. But the goal ultimately is hopefully to have a balance where you can kind of draw from both traditional and Roth accounts later on down the road to try to kind of hit that sweet spot and thread the needle.
That's when somebody gets all adamant about one, I'm like, you can predict the future?
Right.
That's amazing. It's so difficult to do. Joel, you have the last one. There's still a ton.
Ooh.
There's a ton of stuff out there that people mess up pre-retirement. What do you think is a big one that goes on the wall?
I'm ready for this one to get smacked down, but
perfect.
So I see the stink eye coming from Jesse over there. I was going to say, putting all your eggs in the retirement basket. I think especially people who listen to shows like this, shows like How to Money, you're trying to be so thoughtful about your financial future. And it's really easy to get to be like, oh yeah, I'm reading about the massive impact that compounding returns can have. And then we're nose to the grindstone so hard for so long that we're missing out, kind of like what Wes Moss, our buddy Wes Moss, would call core pursuits. We're not pursuing those hobbies on steroids. In the meantime, we get to retirement and we're like, crickets. What do I do with my life now? Because I've been spending it working and I've done all the things that everyone told me to do. But my goodness, I think I missed out on the payoff that retirement can have because I wasn't practicing it along the way, whether that's mini retirements or whether that's just being overly focused and not having enough financial flex to be able to enjoy some of the here and now. So that's maybe long-winded, but I'm going to nominate that.
No, Benjamin Brandt talks about retirement begins now, about doing what you talk about, experimenting, living your life. If you think you want to live in Florida, go on a vacation or two in Florida and see if you'd actually like it there. Oh my God, it's the surface of the sun in July. Who knew? All right, Paula, does this one go up on the wall?
It does. And the way that I would summarize it is I would say that it's the mistake of living in the future rather than simply planning for it.
Oh, what
That's
do you mean
a good way
by
to say
that?
it.
Yeah.
There's a distinction between delayed gratification versus deferred life. And delayed gratification in the conventional sense of that phrase, I actually kind of don't like that phrase either, because I think that saving and investing is inherently gratifying. But the phrase delayed gratification is meant to indicate that saving is simply delaying spending a pile of money until a future date, right?
I see what yeah. So you find spending to be fun, but if you're cranking away at something that you absolutely detest doing just to build a tomorrow that's better, that's not assured, while you're wasting today, that's not good.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So the distinction is deferred life is like you're deferring your entire life. You're not enjoying the life that you have today because you're building towards what you hope will be a better life tomorrow, but like at the expense of having a sucky life today.
All right, you can't let Joel get away with this one, Jesse. You gonna smack this down?
I find it very hard to smack it down. I was thinking about, you know, a lot of times when people write a manifesto, there's kind of a negative connotation there. But our friend, if it's a retirement manifesto, you think of Fritz Gilbert, who lives just north of Joel, I think, down there in the great Peach State. And because Fritz has some really good data points that he put together a few years ago about this very subject. And like that's one of those things that I always come back to. And it's about that subject of the one that I really love is like they Fritz and another colleague of his ran a big poll of Fritz's audience, and I think there was like hundreds, if not over 1,000 different retirees participated in it. And the number one concern for all the pre-retirees was financial. It was just making sure they had their finances in line for retirement. But then when they polled all the post-retirees, people who had already been retired for a number of years, like finances was like number 6 on their list. And all of the top concerns on their list all had to do with lifestyle and making the most out of retirement. And like it had to do with kind of the soft side, right? The soft side of retirement. So the idea that Joel is pointing out, I think, is that a lot of pre-retirees really index for the future. They really index for their finances. They think about all the numbers and all that stuff. And most of the time, what Fritz's data points out is that most of the time that concern is kind of misplaced. Like once your numbers are good enough, you really have to start thinking about the soft stuff. Yeah, there's a great stat. It's like 28% of all retirees at some point feel depressed, or I'm probably butchering it, but one of the data points is that retirees actually get depressed pretty often. And part of it might have to do with, well, did they prepare for all the soft side of retirement?
Yeah, I haven't seen Fritz's numbers, but I have seen retirement expert Ken Dykewald's numbers. And Ken says that the average retiree will have 18 months of pure bliss when they first get into retirement. And then the biggest depression of their life, especially, Jesse, to your point, if they haven't thought about this enough, if they haven't made that transition. So, Joel, it's time to apply the fix then. How do we stay off the wall of shame?
I was going to say, follow up to your question after that honeymoon period, a lot of people go back to work, not because they need the money, but because they need the connection and they haven't built those connections.
Finding the purpose. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I think it's really important in your 30s, 40s, and 50s to, take those mini retirements, maybe like longer vacations. Like, what is it going to look like? What do I want my days to look like? Right? Who do I want in my life? And how do I build those relationships now? Whether that's like a running buddy or somebody you do woodworking with, or whatever your hobby is, have a couple of those hobbies too, that you're not just like, yeah, I'll get to that when I'm 65, but that you do along the way. So that you have like connections with other people who are interested in the same stuff you are. But I think so often, like there's just, especially I'm thinking about like my dad's generation, right? And just, he was working so hard for this far off future that he's often missing some of those connection points along the way. And he's done a great job of building that up in retirement, but it can be. It can be for a lot of people a really, like, it can take a long time. It can be really hard to actually get there if you're not kind of conscientious and being thoughtful about that along the way in those decades leading up to retirement.
Yeah, there's this fork in the road at retirement, really, between people that have spent a lot of time thinking about what they're going to do and people who haven't. And it can either be the best or the worst years. And it's men over age 70 that have the highest rate of suicide of all age groups. So it can be a really, really tough time. All right. They all went up on the board. I'm hoping for better next time, guys. We got to start smacking these things down. But in the second half, we're going to talk about traps during retirement. What do you guys see then? But at the halfway point of every Friday show, we have this year-long competition between our 3 frequent contributors, OG, who's not here today. So Joel, your team OG, and of course, Jesse and Paula. And Joel, we've got good news and bad news then when you play for OG. You want the good news or the bad news?
Go bad news first.
Well, the bad news is you're going to have to guess first, which I never like the guest to have to do. But the good news is it's because you guys are on a record pace. The record is 18 wins during a year. And Doug, how many does OG have?
OG has 9 points as of today. I will say that he has been stagnant of late. Joel, maybe you can break him out of that. He hasn't gained a point in a few weeks because Jesse and Paula screaming up in his rearview mirror. Jesse has 7 points and Paula has now 4 points, at least one of which she earned by herself.
Yeah.
She owes to Sarah Catherine Gutierrez 2 of those points. Yeah. So, all right. Now you know the stakes, Joel. Big stakes to try to stay in the lead as Jesse and Paula are coming for you. But Doug, you've got today's pre-4th of July trivia question. What are we talking about?
Well, hey there, Stackers. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug. And just like I've come halfway through this episode to take command of the podcast, today I'm shining a light on a man who took command of the Continental Army way back in 1775. Yes, nearly 1 year before the U.S. officially declared for free agency, George Washington was put in charge of the whole shebang. Of course, it wasn't like a shebang so much as it was like clunk, 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 clunk. I mean, the troops were pretty poorly equipped. Their supplies were running out all the time, and the British looked more unbeatable than Joe's mom at a poker table. Here is today's question. How many Benjamins did Congress approve to pay George Washington in 1775 dollars as an annual salary to lead this mess of an army? I'll be back right after I go help Joe's mom get ready for our 4th of July celebration. She's readying a bunch of fireworks for the neighborhood kids as we speak. Not sure that's a great idea, Ma.
You always got to remind Mom that somebody's going to lose a finger doing that, Doug.
Yeah.
Like, settle down.
Stevie?
It is horrible. Joel, so how many Benjamins? That's the key. We're talking numbers of Benjamins. In 1775 money, did Congress approve to pay George for leading the Continental Army?
I'm going to say 8 Benjamins.
8 Benjamins.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Jesse. Joel throws down the big 8. What are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I'm trying to do some mental math here. Sorry for my delay. Yeah, I think 8's a pretty good guess. I'm going to go higher though. I'm going to go 11 Benjamins.
11 Benjamins. This army goes all the way to 11. Paula?
So, first of all, do you remember the episode where OG recommended reading the book 1776?
Yes.
So I actually bought the Audible version, the audiobook version of that.
And?
Upon OG's recommendation.
I know where this is going.
And I've listened to it, and I have zero recollection of any numbers.
Well, that's because this happened in 1775, Paula, so it didn't make, you need the prequel.
Okay. I part of me wonders if this is a trick question because Benjamins technically did not exist at the time, right? Because for a number of obvious reasons.
Yeah, look, I'm a jerk. I'm not that much of a jerk.
I will take the under. I will go 7.
Take 7. So we have Paula at 7. Joel, nice and cozy there at 8. And Jesse with 11. Who's got it? We're going to find out in just a minute. We will be right back. All right, Joel, how you feeling about that guess now?
I'm so confident. I'm going to crush these people. OG,
8,
I got you.
8 Benjamins going to nail it. Wait a minute. Yeah, Jesse, you said 11.
I think I said 11 Benjamins.
11 Benjamins. How you feeling? Everybody came in less. Paula
I'm
came
feeling
in down at
good.
the bottom.
I'm feeling good. I was doing some inflation math in my head.
Well, generally, Paula trusts her gut. You know, she probably should have taken the over and didn't. So you got to feel good about that.
I feel great.
I don't know.
Great about that.
But Paula, last week, your gut was right.
I know. I mean, sometimes it comes around. If only I could remember what the book said, because I listened to the book. I just don't remember any of it.
I did the homework.
I did the homework. Totally did the homework. OG gave me the assignment.
Well, we're going to find out. Is it a 4th of July miracle, Doug? Is Paula going to win 2 in a row?
Hey there, Stackers. I'm George Washington fan and guy who's all about independence. In fact, I'm so independent, Joe told me I'd really thrive in an independent living facility. It's Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug. George Washington, father of our country, hero of the Revolution, underpaid guy in charge of the Continental Army. Well, was he underpaid? Let's find out. My question was this: how many Benjamins made up Washington's annual salary when he signed on to head the new Continental Army? Well, I'll say this. These are three of the worst answers I've ever heard on this show. Wow, guys. It was 493 more Benjamins than what Paula guessed, 492 more than what Joel
No, it's Benjamins,
guessed.
Doug. Doug, it's Benjamins.
Okay.
$100 bills, dude.
480.
No, it is. Oh, my God. Who guessed 11? Jesse?
It's 6 less than Jesse and 3 less than Joel and 2 less than Paula.
Yes.
Is the answer 5 Benjamins, I assume?
Yeah, 6 Benjamins less than Jesse.
Well, we'll have to get back to having a pre-show meeting about this, Joe, so I'm clued into that. The correct answer is 5, making Jesse our winner.
There we go. No,
Fun
making
fact,
Wait,
Paula
Homer
our
Simpson
winner.
proved
that make
Paula?
That makes Paula our winner, Doug.
All right, take over trivia, Joe.
Sorry, Doug. Sorry. Well, can I ask a question of clarification? Could you tell us the answer in dollars just so we're sure?
$500.
$500. Okay. I would assume that means Paula wins.
Right.
Nicely done, Paula.
Yes.
Thank you.
Paula.
Thank you.
How did that happen, Paula?
Sometimes there is a turnaround. Isn't that like the plot line of every Goliath comes up upon David? No, David comes up upon Goliath. Kind of a plot line movie thing. I'm
Wait.
asking you because I
You're
think
sneaking up.
you've seen movies.
Yeah.
I have not, but I have been informed that in movies, ultimately the underdog prevails.
Is this going to be a Christmas miracle? Like at the end of the year? Are
I
we
think
going
it's
to
a
have that
4th of
happen?
July miracle.
It is a 4th of July miracle, but I'm saying, is this like the beginning
Maybe.
of like the big second half run? It's going to be
Maybe.
super.
I don't want to make any predictions.
All right. Speaking of super, we're in the middle of a super discussion about, see what I did there? We're in the middle of a super discussion about retirement, and we got this wall of shame, Joel. So now we're into retirement, and I'm going to call these largely like, I thought most of what you were going to tell me was about not having a spending plan. And in some ways it did, because Joel, you said that was the fact that we would have no clue what we were going to do. So we don't know what we're going to spend, right? In retirement, don't think about what we're going to spend because we don't know what we're going to do. Paula, you talked about black swans, which is we have no idea if we're going to have to retire early, if we can retire now, which is also has a lot to do with spending. And Jesse, the fact that money isn't all yours. Also, we think we get to spend X and instead we're spending Y. So I'm going to call these, I'm going to predict ahead of time that yours are going to be timing traps, that these are going to be, we're not sure about the timing of these different things. But Joel, let's try to put one on the board. What are you going to nominate?
All right, I'm going to say, and only because I've known people who have done this, is thinking that the retirement nest egg you built up, it's ready to be spent once you reach retirement. You're like, well, it's retirement's in the name of the funds that I'm like investing and saving up, and I've reached retirement, so boom, it's go time. And so I've just seen people make big mistakes accessing way too much of their money way too quickly in retirement and then being like deer in the headlights afterwards.
Going, wait a minute. And then when you try to pump the brakes, it's too late.
Right. Yeah. And like, but they said it was for retirement. I'm retired. I started using it. And it's like, yeah, but it's so poorly, like with zero methodology behind it. And just blowing vast sums of money really quickly right after you reach that point of not working.
Jesse, does this go on the wall?
It does. It goes on the wall, I think, for a couple reasons. There's a location reason, and then there's an allocation reason that I think of as Joel was describing this. And the location mistake is there are some people out there who are like, yep, I'm 12 months away from retirement. So when that day comes, I'm going to move all that money from my 401k into my bank account, because that's what you do, right? I've reached retirement. Now it's time just to put the money somewhere safe. I no longer will invest it. I'm going to put it in the bank account. And that should make us then think of the allocation reason, which there are some people who say, yeah, well, retirement is 1 year away. And I've listened to podcasts like Stacking Benjamins or How to Money, and they say that 1 year isn't enough time to really be invested in stocks. So I'm just going to move all of my retirement monies into bonds and cash. And they don't realize that retirement is going to be a 30-year long process. And some of that 30 years is pretty much, that's long term, and you can stay invested in the stock market if you want to for at least a good amount of your money. So anyway, I hear what Joel is saying, and it belongs on the wall, because I think those are two. The first one might not be that common, but the second mistake, the allocation mistake, I think is very common.
All right, Paula, I'm gonna throw some dirt on this one, and you tell me what you think. Which is that we had Dana Onspot on recently talking about how, you've got your go-go years, your slow-go years, and then your no-go years. Why wouldn't you go ahead and spend more money during those go-go years? Joel be damned.
You're not the only one who said that.
The best solution that I heard for this is to take a separate bucket of money. Let's say it's maybe your travel fund, right? And in this very specific separate bucket of money, you say this is the bucket that is allocated specifically for traveling during the first 10 years of retirement. And so then you allocate exactly what that budget is, and you have a bucket that is just that. And cool, now you can manage that bucket for the express purpose of traveling during that first decade. That's a way that you can manage the go-go years, and there's and the goal is to spend down that bucket within the first 10 years of retirement. You want that bucket to be 0 at the end of year 10, right? So that's a way of managing a specific bucket for the go-go years, so that you can enjoy, there are things that you can do that many people can do in their 60s that they can't do in their 80s. You can enjoy your 60s, but you're not misallocating your 80s and 90s.
So are you saying then that there actually still is some planning for the amount that goes in here? So you're saying it is going on the wall?
Goes on the wall.
Oh, damn it. Joel, what's going on there?
That's how I roll.
Paula had a fix. Do you like Paula's fix, or do you have another one?
Well, I want you to know I paid Jesse and Paula ahead of time to agree with me just to mess you up.
So you gave him 5 Benjamins?
Right, exactly. So yeah, I mean, this is one of those things where you just have to realize, like Jesse was alluding to, that there's many decades of retirement. And so just buying an RV, right? That's like a massive expense. And that's the kind of thing that maybe a new retiree would pull the trigger on, even if it absorbs far too much of their retirement funds. They haven't planned well for that purchase. And they're just saying, well, hey, listen, YOLO, these are the years where I'm young and reasonably fit, and I can get out there and do this. And then they realize pretty quickly, wait a second, I don't like RVs, and driving across the country is actually not my jam. And I dropped $250,000 on the super fancy RV. And now, because of the way depreciation works on it, it's worth $150 when I try to resell it. And so there's this kind of belief too, where hey, I got Social Security coming down the pike. My home's is getting close to paid off. Why don't I just use a big chunk of this money now? And I'm with Paula. It's a great idea. If that's something you've tested and tried already, and hey, RV, that RV lifestyle really is my jam. It's going to light me up and make me happy. And we're going to be doing that for many years. That's great. It's worth spending the money on. Just make sure you've planned ahead for it, and you're not dipping into a huge chunk of the investment nest egg that you built up, because you need that money to keep working for you for decades, and you need to be able to use it to live life, for many, many years.
I had clients when I was a financial planner, Joel. I swear you must know them, because it was George and Gail, world's nicest people. When they retired, they bought an RV that at that time cost about $100,000. And this was maybe 1998. So think about that in today's dollars, right? Just a beautiful RV. They lasted 2.5 years before they were in my office going, it was too small. I love my spouse, but this is not enough room. And we don't like traveling as much as we thought we did. Yeah. So it goes back to the same thing that you talked about earlier. The way that Dana, by the way, solves this is just replanning every couple of years. How much can I spend? How much can I spend? And roll it out there. You were going to say something else though, Joel.
Well, just the last thing too is to know how do you know whether or not that purchase is going to make you happy? You have to test drive it in smaller ways. And there are a lot of people who will I think the RV has to be one of the most regretted purchase decisions that anyone makes after like a timeshare, right? Like it's just people, there are way too many. It sounds great. And like traveling the country, like and parking at these campsites, and it just sounds awesome. I mean, it sounds awesome to me, but then I've experienced so many people who have done the thing and they didn't really like it very much. I'm like, what am I missing? So what I've got to do then, if I'm thinking it might work out for me, is to rent one for a while, borrow one from a friend for a couple weeks, like test out the lifestyle. My wife and I we were just on vacation. We're like, every time we go somewhere, we're like, I could totally move here. And we start thinking through what it would look like for us to move to that place. And then the more I think about it, we're like, but if we bought a place here, every time we come, we're going to have to think about like all the fixes we have to make. And well, how often are we going to actually be here? And what if we want to take a trip somewhere else? We're going to feel obligated to going to the house that we bought.
It's a whole different experience.
It's a whole different experience. And it's actually, when you run the numbers, much cheaper to book the hotel room or the Airbnb in the place where we want to travel and have the freedom to go wherever we want. RV locks you down. Owning the vacation property locks you down. And I just think for a lot of people, they haven't really thought through it well enough. And so they make, sadly, a mistake with a lot of their money that doesn't pay off the way they thought it was going to.
Paula, what's next to go on the wall?
So on kind of piggybacking off of what we were just talking about with regard to the RV, the travel, like the underlying assumption under all of this is that when people retire, they want to travel, or when people retire, they want to engage in hobbies. And I think that like having a copy paste retirement, I would say having a copy paste retirement.
Having a copy paste retirement.
Yeah.
Jesse?
Joe, I could tell by that you had a little hint in your voice right now that you really don't want me to put this up on the wall. I could hear it in you. I could hear it in your voice.
Joe just wants a cage match here, you know?
Yeah.
Like, Jesse, this is the one, Jesse. This is it.
Take
Jesse.
out the folding chair, Jesse.
Let me I'm climbing up on the ropes. Let me ask you, Paula. So you just mean that retirees are looking to the way that other retirees live their life, and they're like, well, I want to do the thing that all those other retirees did. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that oftentimes, and social mimicry is natural. There's this guy, Luke Burgess, and he writes this book all about like what's called mimetic desire. And that is like a very innate human, you see it even in young children, like we learn what to want by observing others.
Fidget spinners.
Yeah, exactly.
Frozen
Fidget
yogurt.
spinners are right.
Yeah, exactly. And so it is a like very intrinsically human trait, like mimetic desire. But the issue in retirement is that oftentimes that can come at the expense of purpose, of community, of these things that are well documented to actually correlate to longer lifespans and greater sense of life, greater self-reported life satisfaction, right? So if you're, going to Tahiti, but your grandkids aren't there or your friends aren't there, sure, it looks great on Instagram or whatever it is that you're using when you're 70, like Facebook. But like, it's not, it's a goal that came about from copy paste, not that came about from like a deeper place.
Put it up on the wall.
Oh, come on.
She's totally right, Joe. I don't know what you want me to do. Paula's right.
She is right, but the problem, Jesse, you're done.
Cut me off.
But the reason, Joel, it shouldn't go on the wall, I think, is because it's the same thing you said about pre-retirement. Like you didn't do enough of this planning and living ahead of time, which creates what Paula said.
Yeah, you're stepping on my toes here, Paula.
That's right. That's right.
But we know this is true. Like talking about froyo, whatever it is, that's like the popular fad of the moment. Stanley cups a few years ago, right? Oh my gosh,
totally.
Those things are the biggest pain in the ass, like ever of all time. They're the worst drinking vessels
because they're so damn big.
And they're huge, right? But like everybody was like, oh, I got to get 6 shades of it, and they take up so much space in your cupboards, and they're the worst. And yet everybody bought into it. And this is like, we're humans. Like this is human nature, right? Which is what Paul's alluding to. I think it comes from a lack of self-knowledge oftentimes about what actually makes us tick, what we actually like, because we're constantly looking toward the world around us to tell us what we should be liking. And it's harder than ever to kind of get off of that sort of, out of that way of thinking, out of that mindset. But I agree that for like if you want an unsuccessful retirement, like try to do what it looks like is making everyone else happy. Because I think so often behind the scenes, what looks like it's making everyone else happy is putting people into lots of debt, is making them pretty miserable, maybe behind the scenes. And those epic trips, like sometimes they're great. Like I'm not even, I think travel for a lot of people really does like light them up, and it's worth the effort, it's worth the expense. But then for a lot of other people, they're doing it in an attempt to mimic what the successful retirement should look like, instead of deciding what is it that a successful retirement for me looks like.
All right, Doug, you've got the deciding vote, because I don't think it goes on the wall, but it sounds like, Joel, you saying it does go on the wall.
Don't make me do this, Joe.
Doug, you don't care. Does this go on the wall or not?
I think it does.
Oh, man.
You're the odd man out here, Joe.
Oh, man. Sorry, Paula. It goes on the wall. We'll go ahead and put it on. It isn't that I disagree, because I definitely agree. We don't spend enough time thinking at a time about what we want to do, and we look at all the pretty stuff, like you said so eloquently. It is definitely a big problem. And it's funny, the longer that all of us do this, we talk about money less and we talk about lifestyle design more. Listening to all of your shows, we're always tying it more and more to lifestyle design. As we get more research, we find out just how absolutely important this is. Whether you have a Roth IRA or not, pretty important. But whether you think about retirement, far more important. So we've got Paula's. We've got, who else went? Who did I lead off with? Joel?
I went.
Yes. All right. So here he is, the man, the myth, the legend. Jesse, you're bringing us home.
My thought is that, I'm looking over at my notepad, it's when people assume a constant withdrawal rate. Like a lot of, you're pre-retirement, you're going into retirement, you've run your retirement math, you read a book by, Bill Bengen or something like that, and you're like, cool, I've got $2 million. Bill Bengen says I can withdraw 4.7% per year, 94 grand a year, inflation adjusted every year. I'm golden. And then the fact of the matter is, though, like that withdrawal rate is not going to remain constant for the 20 or 25 or 30 plus years of your retirement. There's going to be this one year where you need to sink some money into your house to replace some stuff, and you actually need to buy a new car. And on top of that, you need to withdraw all your normal lifestyle costs. And that's totally okay. And that's totally normal. But if you've convinced yourself that you're locked in to this, prescribed number, right, withdrawal rate, then you are going to throttle down your own lifestyle. You're going to self-limit how you can live. And it's all because you entered retirement and you've been living your retirement with this false understanding of how safe withdrawal rates work in retirement. It's never going to be a constant number. And you can still analyze your way to a really happy place, accounting for the fact that your withdrawal rate will change over time. That's totally okay. So that's my nominee for the wall.
Okay, so Paula, I saw head nods from you, which means you want this not on the wall. That's what you're trying to say.
It is on the wall. It is so on the wall. Because it's true. It's true. Like the whole premise of the 4% withdrawal rule is steady, steady drawdowns, 4% adjusted for inflation every subsequent year. That is not, it's just not how humans live, And so you go into retirement modeling this thing that sounds great on paper, but that just has absolutely no basis in the real world.
Isn't that like saying that a budget isn't real world? Because if you set a 4% of your funds for that's your income for the year, that's your budget, but that's not how people live. I guess I'm not understanding.
When you're planning for retirement, if you're in a position where you are unprepared for retirement, you wake up one morning and you're like, you've just turned 50, you have zero saved, and you're like, oh no, this is an emergency. I need to start doing something, right? And you have to figure out what is going to be like a bare bones, like, here's the budget that I'm going to live on, and this is going to be really hand to mouth. Okay, cool. Like I get this is your quote unquote salary, or, and you live on it in the same way that you would live on a salary. That's something that you might have to do out of necessity. But if you are, in a forward-looking way, planning for the retirement that you want, which might include replacing your car, it might include upgrading your kitchen, it might include taking a trip to Alaska or Hawaii, like it might include all of these discretionary expenses. Those are going to come at they're going to pop.
Lumpy.
Yeah,
It's gonna be
lumpy.
lumpy.
Yeah, it's going to be lumpy. And the part that we're not talking about, medical spending, and that medical spending is also going to be really lumpy. And that's something
yeah.
that for the 50-year-old who has zero saved, they don't really have a way of dealing with that medical spending. Like if their budget is the $90,000 a year that they can live on, that better include a huge amount for medical spending, because if it doesn't,
Heart transplant. Or something.
yeah, like they have no bandwidth to deal with those lumpy expenses when they come up.
All right, Joel, you already said not thinking through your expenses. I mean, Jesse's is really just a modification of yours, so clearly it doesn't go on the wall.
Yeah.
Joel, you're a kind of guy though, Joel, who isn't easily manipulated. You're too bright to be manipulated. So just keep that in mind
Jesse?
too.
Who would manipulate him?
That's
I'm just
true.
pointing out a truth.
Yeah, you should have seen me in the Stanford prison experiment, man. Like it was not good. Well, no, this totally goes on the wall, and this is made me think about even just my parents' situation when they first retired. Like it was, we kind of had a plan thought out, right? And then we get a medical diagnosis from my mom that's not great, and you have to make a pivot. Like when it comes to even, hey, when are we taking Social Security? Right? Like there's this, I think part of our thought process early on was like, well, we can take more than 4% a year, maybe even take 7 or 8% out of your portfolio in an effort to hold off on taking Social Security. And then guess what? At this point in time, when you start taking Social Security, you also have a paid off mortgage, then you can take less. Like it's okay to expend more of your portfolio a little earlier on in order to achieve these other goals. And then when a diagnosis comes down the pike, you maybe make a bit of a different decision. And you say, well, actually, it makes more sense to claim Social Security now and to withdraw less of my retirement fund. So there's always, I think there's different things at play, right? And there's a million different things that can change and tweak your plan. You're probably not most of the time making dramatic overhauls, although sometimes I think that's necessary. But that idea that like 4%, just like set it and forget it, kind of like those old school rotisserie cookers on the infomercials, like that's not the right approach. I mean, I think it's good to have that rule of thumb in the back of your mind, but then you have to be willing to make changes along the way too.
I love doing these live on YouTube. And J. Edwards Dev hanging out with us says, Bill banging in the Stanford prisoner experiment. Y'all are nerds. I feel so seen. Like you finally found your people. I remember first time I went to FinCon and I'm having a discussion with Steve Stewart and another guy about term insurance versus permanent. And I'm like, these are my people. This is amazing. Yeah. So welcome. If you want to hang out and be a part of this nerdery, just join us on Monday afternoons, which is super, super, super fun. Speaking of fun, this was a great discussion, although I am a little annoyed that they all went on the wall. But actually, in truth, they were all really good. So thank you for that. I think we need a second one, though, because I actually have a list of like 8 more that I was thinking you might say. And I didn't hear any of those. So the list is long, a mistake. So maybe we can help people in a future Stacking Benjamins episode with more of these. But let's find out what's going on where you all are working. And Jesse, you got something?
Just a question, Joe. Can you run polls in the YouTube chat?
I don't know. Doug, can we run polls? Do you know?
I don't know how to do that. I haven't ever seen it before. Doesn't mean it can't be done, but I don't know.
Because it's hard for us when we all know each other and we're facing each other live to vote each other to not go on the wall. But for the audience to anonymously decide, it's kind of like, it's a little more Roman Colosseum, thumbs up, thumb down. I mean, that could be interesting.
Oh, that could be interesting. If we get the ability for that would be fantastic. Yes.
Joe, you're really trying to breed some enmity here today, which
I was.
I don't know what that's about.
It's so annoying. We get to the end of the episode and you guys all still like each other. Like, what's up?
Go to therapy, Joe. Okay.
What's up with that? Joel Larsgaard, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Always a joy.
Super having you. What is going on? What's coming up? Give us a scoop, man. What's coming up at How to Money?
Oh, dude. So I'm trying to take my own medicine, and the month of July I'm out of town, baby. Like no work. So you might, if you're coming over to hear How to Money, it's a lot of replays in July, but I hope if you haven't listened before, it'll be new to you. So enjoy.
It's greatest hits.
That's right.
We actually, you know what's funny is we have greatest hits coming up on Stacking Benjamins next week as well. People are going to hear Scott Galloway next week. We're going to hear a great roundtable discussion. So some stuff that maybe you haven't heard before. But you guys, what you talk about very seriously though, what you talk about is so evergreen. Like these tips, they're not things that go away tomorrow, Joel. You don't talk about like the fads.
No, I mean, I will say on our Friday episodes, we call them the Friday Flight. Those are where we try to tackle the timely news stories of the week and how they pertain to your personal finances.
But you're not going to replay any of those.
No, we won't. Yeah. We won't. But like, yeah, so most of the stuff you're going to hear, if you haven't heard it before, is going to feel still fresh and new. We try to pick the ones that make the most sense or some of our favorite episodes.
Awesome. And that is it. How to Money, where finer podcasts are found. Paula, Pant, what's coming up at the amazing Afford Anything show?
So on the first Friday of every month, we host an episode in which we take a look at the economic landscape. And so for our first Friday, our July 1st Friday episode, we go deep into the New York City rent freeze and unpack what's happening there, what the consequences are. We kind of lay it out, explain first for people who might not be acquainted with how rent works in New York City, because New York is kind of a different beast. We first lay out, here's how the rental system in New York works. Here is the new freeze, and here are all of the downstream implications.
The quote of the day, New York is a different beast. We had no idea. But it is fascinating, and to watch it work, not work, in between, always fun. And that's at Afford Anything, where the finest podcasts are found.
Absolutely.
What's going on, Mr. Cramer, at Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors?
Yeah. Wrapping up June, another good month. A couple days ago, Frank Vasquez stopped by and I peppered him with some risk parity questions, including, managed futures and gold. Like, how do we incorporate these assets that other people might see as suboptimal into a portfolio that ends up being, quote unquote, better than a traditional retirement portfolio? So it was a good conversation. Frank's got really good answers to any question you could possibly lob his way. So I tried to lob some good questions his way and he had some good answers. And then next week, we're doing an Ask Me Anything episode exclusively about Roth conversions, a very popular topic that I get questions about. And so I just compiled a bunch of questions into
Wait a minute, you said Ask Me Anything, but about exclusively one topic? Ask me anything.
Ask
as long
me
as
only
it's about
one
this
thing.
one thing. Wouldn't that
Good
be
point, Joe?
AMOT?
It's an AMOT. It's an AMOT.
And that's it, the Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors podcast. Well, guys, thanks a ton. And by the way, hang out after the credits, because for Independence Weekend, our last show before Independence Weekend, we always like to end our show with one of my favorite pieces from one of my favorite comedians, Stephen Marchant. So we're going to say goodbye, and then you're going to hear a little clip from Mr. Marchant talking about, he's, by the way, a British comedian, which will give you an idea of kind of where we're headed. But Doug, what should we have learned on today's show, man?
Well, Joe, first take some advice from Joel Larsgaard. Maybe test out your retirement plans before you devote a giant pile of money into, say, an RV that'll get real small real quick. Second, heed Jesse Cramer's warning. Your pre-tax wealth will not be reflective of your retirement wealth. Don't forget, the tax man cometh. But the big lesson, if you just bought a shopping cart full of fireworks, remember that no matter how much they beg, none of those belong in your neighbor's pants, especially the sparklers. Those things are hotter than the stereo in my El Camino. Thanks to Joel Larsgaard for joining us today. Get to know Joel a little better by checking out his podcast, How to Money. We'll also include links in our show notes at stackingbenjamins.com. Thanks to Paula Pant for hanging out with us today. You'll find her fabulous podcast, Afford Anything, wherever you listen to the finest podcasts. And finally, thanks to Jesse Cramer for joining us. Jesse is the host of the Personal Finance for Long-Term Investors podcast. Check it out. It's filthy.
Ask him anything.
Ask him one thing. Yeah. Big thanks to neighbor Doug who wrote the credits today because our writer forgot. So big thanks to Doug for filling in some potholes. Here comes Happy 4th of July, everyone in the U.S., and happy weekend for everybody else.
Oh, happy 4th of July, America. Ready to fire up the grill and celebrate our victory over the Brits? Well, I'm not. Because despite that incredibly convincing American accent, I'm one of those Brits. Now, I've acted in film and TV for years, but my greatest performance is acting like I don't care that every summer you gobble down tube sausages and celebrate kicking our arses, or butts, as you say, incorrectly. Do you really still have to celebrate your emancipation from us? I mean, that's like your girlfriend breaking up with you and then celebrating with fireworks. Every year. For 300 years. It gets my goat. But what really gets my goat is imagining how great America would be if we were still in charge. Oh, America, if we'd won the war, you'd have better comedy, news, TV programs, and way better rude words. Oh, I'm talking fanny, trollop, minger, tart, minge bag, bleeding, sodding, blooming, cocked up, get stuffed, and of course, wanker. Imagine how sophisticated you'd sound when you're insulting someone. Oi, Brad, your wife's a slag! Now piss off, you wanker! See how classy that sounded? With our accents and your American self-confidence, you'd be unstoppable. Yeah, you'd have to pay a few more taxes, but you can't put a price on that. Great Britain, too, would be the greatest country on earth. Your lawyers would all wear powdered wigs, so criminals really respect them, and you'd have all the mushy peas you can stuff down your bloody great gobs. And if you get sick, you don't need to worry about medical insurance, because with the National Health Service, a doctor will see you for free in about 2 years. Plus, your taxes would be spent on things you really need, like a royal family who do the tough jobs no one else wants to do, like being driven around in a really nice car while waving. You'll want to eat some apple pie, then shoot some hoops and have a hoedown? In bollocks.
This show is the property of SB Podcasts, LLC, copyright 2026, and is created by Saul-Sehy. You'll find out about our awesome team at stackingbenjamins.com, along with the show notes and how you can find us on YouTube and all the usual social media spots. Come say hello. Oh yeah, and before I go, not only should you not take advice from these nerds, don't take advice from people you don't know. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Before making any financial decisions, speak with a real financial advisor. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor Doug, and we'll see you next time back here at the Stacking Benjamin Show.
What was that? It's called the medium sketch.
The medium sketch?
Yeah, it wasn't rare, and it certainly wasn't well done.